My name's Dawn Davies. I am the head buyer for the Whisky Exchange. And I am at work at the moment, and I'm just going to come out and say that. I wish this was my house, but sadly it's not. I'm at work because I have to be for certain reasons. And also, just so you know, I am walking to work or I'm driving, and we are very, very careful in the building about our distancing, social distancing. I'm pretty much the only person in my floor. So I'm very much in social isolation. So talking to you guys was going to be lovely, but now I'm just talking to myself again. So my background is wine. I started doing wine about 20 years ago, and I am now very firmly into the spirits camp. And I'm not going to tell you I'm a rum expert, because I'm not. I fell in love with rum about 2 years ago fully. So I'd always had an interest in it, but I think, it was two gentlemen that really, actually three, that really kind of gave me the real passion that I have now for it. And I'm definitely sort of wanting to learn more and getting more and more into it. And it was Luca Gargano and Richard Seal were the two main people that really kind of got me hooked on rum, as you could say. So about 4 years ago, Sakinda and myself sat down, Sakinda's my boss, and we were looking at rum categories, and we were saying, it's super complicated for consumers to understand what different rums kind of, by looking at the bottle, you can't really tell anything. By using terms white, gold, dark, you can tell absolutely nothing. So we wanted to try and do what the Scotch whisky or the whisky industry has done very well, which is really give some definition to the category. So you have blends, you have malts, and you have an idea of peated whisky. You have an idea what those sentences or those statements or those descriptions mean. And quite a few years ago, Luca and Richard actually had started a classification or had done a classification system on rum, and we very, very much used that as the basis of what we did. We didn't really change it that much. What we did was just look at the names of what they had done, just to make it a little bit more kind of linking back to the Scotch language or the Scotch whisky language, to kind of give people a basis to the classification without having too much knowledge. So that was the first part of it. So we looked very much at, firstly, the base product, what it was made from. So rum, two main ways of producing rum. You can either produce it from molasses, which is, of course, the byproduct of sugar production. And these kind of rums tend to have that sort of treacly, rich note, very much so on the palate. And then also the sugarcane juice. So these ones tend to have that lovely grassy and herbaceous character, very much sort of the tequila mezcal of the rum world. And then we looked at the how it was produced. And the three basic ways, and I'm talking in a very, very basic way, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, is one, with a traditional pot still. So a traditional pot still would be giving a spirit that is definitely a lot more rich, a lot more weighty. It has a lot more kind of intensity on the palate because you're not using as many distillations. Then you have a column still. A column still was done, and a simple traditional column still, what we're calling it, is basically a column still that was sort of one of the original column still designs. And of course it did mature into things like the coffee still. But these are ones where the rum, the spirit is lighter, it has a little more elegance, it's less intense on the palate, but there's still complexity there because it's not taking anything away, it's just giving you a lighter spirit. And then the last one is, as the industry increased and rum production needed to go up, of course technology moves with it. And there were then these multi-column stills. And these are ones that can churn out a lot of rum, and they are the basis of the majority of the big rums in the world, and we have to have them, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just a different style of method of making, and they tend to make rums that are very, very light in style, that don't have a huge amount of character in the actual flavour profile, because actually what you're wanting to do is then layer in flavour through, say, maybe oak, or even just use as a mixing drink. You don't want anything too complicated if you're mixing it with your Coke or your ginger beer or whatever you want to do. necessarily. Some people like a lot of flavour, so things like Rare Nephew and do have a lot of punch, and they're definitely not multi-column. They've got a lot of character, but for a white rum, oftentimes these multi-column stills are used because of the production volumes, and nothing wrong with that. So we kind of looked at those three, and then we layered in other things like, is it one distillery? So, a single malt, one distillery, a single rum, one distillery, and then blended. Of course, that makes sense. Especially in the Caribbean, there's rums that are blended from a lot of different areas, and now we're seeing more and more rums over in Europe and worldwide where they're blends from different islands and what have you. That would be no more different than a blended whiskey. So we took that, and then I just felt it wasn't going far enough. And a friend of mine, Paul McFadden, and I were talking, and he said to me, was talking about flavor camps and how he sometimes likened certain styles to vodka, certain styles to tequila, certain styles to cognac. And actually there was something that really kind of triggered in my head, and I was like, well, how do you and I talk about product? Well, we talk about it not by what still it's produced from, unless we're super geeky, which I am a little bit, but we definitely talk about flavouring, and flavours my modus operandi, that's what I was born to be talking about and doing, and that's what I've done all my life. So my background is actually wine. I was a sommelier for a long time, and I'm also now a master of wine. So, very, very much flavour is in my DNA, and I think, when I started thinking about it, I was like, actually, we've already done this for whiskey. We've put online our whiskies into different flavour camps, and we have about 8 different flavour camps for whiskey. And I thought, that's just too much. I think 6 is probably fine for rum. And I just went away and I looked at the different rums, and I actually went to Rumfest Paris, and I tasted a whole load of rums. It was really, really interesting, actually. Rums that I haven't tasted for ages, I'd kind of forgotten about, which was really lovely, and some new ones as well. And I just kind of, it fell into place, actually. I kind of looked at the categories that I'd formed in my head, these 6 flavour camps, which I've kind of thrown around to people I respect in the industry very much. And they'd say, yeah, no, these make sense. And so I kind of took those flavour camps and I went around and I tasted. And actually, what was very interesting is the production method actually tied into the flavour camp to varying degrees, which actually made me think that we were probably on the right line when we were using these flavour camps. So I have 6 different flavour camps that I'll talk you through today based on these rums. And then I'll just talk a little bit about kind of the rums themselves. So we are going to start with the Angostura, 5-year-old. So Angostura from Trinidad and Tobago. I actually started producing Angostura Bitters, which at the moment we're seeing a real surge in the popularity of Angostura Bitters, which is really interesting. So I think a lot of you are making old fashions at home, and I definitely think now you've got to make your old fashioned with some rum. So much more exciting. No, I'm joking. Whatever you want, whatever you like to do. So Angostura, for me, this sits in the light and uncomplicated category. So this is one of the categories of rum that we're talking about, and light and uncomplicated is basically a category that we're using because these are rums that are really easy drinking. They're probably used for cocktails. They're not meant to be complex and crazy pricing or anything like that. They're actually just rums for everyday drinking. And that's perfect, If you're going to have your Bacardi and Coke, that's exactly what you want. You want a really nice, easy drinking rum that you can just mix and enjoy. You'll notice here, a lot of people would say, well, is it not all going to be white rum that's light and uncomplicated? Well, absolutely not. There are some younger aged rums that actually are light and uncomplicated, and I think this one's a really lovely example of it. So, on the nose for me, this really pops out to you. It's got orange, it's got a lovely toffee fudge character, a little bit of that wood spice coming in just on the nose. They're giving a little bit of kind of sandalwood kind of character, but just a really lovely, inviting nose. So on the palate, yes, I am spitting because I am driving after this. So on the palate, when I talk about light, I'm talking about actually the weight on the palate. So when you look at texture, we're very good a lot of the time at drinking and not actually tasting. And part of taste is all your sensations. So it's your eyes, what you see. It's your nose, what you smell. It can be your ears, if it's got bubbles potentially. And very, very much how it feels on your palate. Does it coat your palate? How heavy does it feel on your palate? And this is a really light rum. It sits on my palate. It's really easy. And when we're talking about uncomplicated, lots of people ask me, how do you judge quality? And how do you judge something in terms of its complexity? And quality can be great value for money, something like this rum. This is a very good quality rum at the price point. So, when I talk about quality, I'm not talking necessarily about expensive or cheap or what have you. It's all about where it fits in that bracket. But complexity is a very different thing. Complexity definitely is something that points to premiumization, that points to something that's got a lot more going for it, that you really want to probably sit and relax and enjoy in a glass and let it open. And, that's fine if you're having an afternoon dram, but if I just want to have a really nice old-fashioned pre-dinner, why would I not use something like the Angostura 5? So on the palate, this is light. It's got that lovely little sort of toffee caramel note coming on through, and then a little dryness on the finish just from that little bit of wood spice. But a really easy drinking style rum, which for me, perfect for mixing. So, you'll definitely see this kind of character from the multi-column stills. They definitely have that lightness of touch, and they definitely have that sort of very easy drinking, everyday quality to them. So that could be rums from, say, Havana in Cuba, Bacardi, and I'm not talking about all of the levels, but definitely the younger styles, whether they're aged or unaged. So, white rum again, but this one is definitely not light and uncomplicated. This is very, very much a rum that pretty much won my heart, actually. Not this one in particular, this one specifically. This is Clarins Communal, and this is one of Luca's babies, but actually was introduced to me by a gentleman called Daniele Biondi, and he's pretty much got me hooked on this stuff now, which is slightly dangerous. And this one very much is a white rum with attitude. And when I'm asked often what would be my last drink on earth, or what is my desert island drink, I used to never be able to answer. I used to be like, oh, well, sometimes it's Riesling, sometimes it's Nebbiolo, or it was normally a wine. And then I discovered Clarins Sergio. Sergio is one of the producers that goes into this Communal, which is a blend of 4. And I think that's when I said, that is it. I could stop drinking right now and I'd be happy. Well, as long as I could keep drinking that, I'd be happy. And, it's very much captured my heart. So Clarins is a sugarcane juice rum from Haiti. Clarins is the style of rum, or the type of product, Clarins. And this is a blend, as I said, of 4 producers. And it's very much, I think, a wine drinker's rum. And I say that because actually it's probably one of the closest spirits I've found that has a sense of terroir. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of slack for that from spirit lovers, but I'm a wine girl. So terroir comes from the earth, my friends, I'm afraid to say. No, it definitely is about the distillery, and it's definitely about other things. But, the heart of terroir has to be, you have to be able to taste where it's from. And Clarins definitely has a style that you can taste. And for me, this is where you have white rums that are definitely not light and uncomplicated, because I could smell that from the minute I poured it. I mean, it was like bam, out the glass. And right now on the nose, it's got a lovely herbaceous character, capsicum, a little bit of white pepper, definitely some white almonds, some floral notes, a little bit of papaya. I mean, there's so much going on here. And this is when I come back to you and say, we're talking about this complexity idea. This rum is asking questions of me. It's saying, there's more in me, keep trying. And, that's when you really get a product that's got complexity, is when it says to you, hey, I'm here and I'm going to keep changing. I'm going to keep giving you different notes and different flavors. If I leave this in the glass, it's just going to keep changing. And I think a lot of times we just drink and we don't let the spirit evolve in the glass. And I think that's a really, really key thing to try and do is let those flavors kind of come out and give them a chance. Look, if you were stuck in a bottle for God knows how many months and years and whatever, wouldn't you need a little time to kind of shake it off? You've got to let these spirits speak a little bit. I know I sound like a slight nutter, but hey, if you're in this industry, you are a slight nutter. So, the nose is amazing, just really, really interesting. Almost has a little kind of blue cheesy note as well, which is kind of cool. This is a rum that I have to not spit, and I am not drinking for a couple of hours, driving for a couple of hours, sorry, and I can't spit this one out. That's slightly cruel to myself. So on the palate, this is basically from a pot still, and Claran is from these guys here, so the 4 different producers, made in a very, very natural way. So wild yeast, there's no pesticides, herbicides, or anything used in the, I was about to say winery, in the sugarcane fields. It's often multi-crop, so different types of crops, brought in by horse or whatever, so it's very, very natural production, that long, slow ferment, which gives a lot of intensity on the palate. Different flavors are allowed to be affected by the different types of yeast that are working on it. And, it's got a lot of character. I've got this lovely menthol finish. I mean, this is just going and going and going. I could probably walk out of here, come back 5 minutes later, and I'd still be tasting it. And it's definitely got that grassiness, that menthol. It's got that little hint of tropical fruit. There's definitely florals in there. For me, that almonds coming through again. A little bit of pear drop as well, actually. Every time I go back to this rum, I discover something new. But this, for me, I can drink neat, but also I really love in something like a daiquiri, especially the Communal, which is the kind of entry-level Claran. So please go and discover Claran, because not enough people are drinking it, and we need more people drinking it because it's just such a special product. Sorry, kind of quiet now. Right, so on to the next flavour camp. So the first 2 flavour camps were very much around sort of white or young rums. So also what you'll find with sort of that herbaceous and grassy flavour camp, a lot of agricoles sit in this camp, especially young agricoles or white agricoles, aged agricoles. And that's that grassiness coming through from that sugarcane juice. That's very, very fresh and intense. You can get it in some of the aged ones, but it's very, very much coming from that juice-based rums. Could be in a traditional column, as is in a lot of countries that produce agricole rum. So there are only really 4 countries that produce agricole rum. Have I got that right? Probably not. But they're all French islands and very much dominated what we call the AOP, Appellation Origine Protégée, which basically means they have rules and regulations to go around production, around growth of the sugarcane, what type of sugarcane you can use. So not every sugarcane juice rum is an agricole. This is a Claran. A rum from Martinique is an agricole. So be really, really careful that you don't lump everything into one category just because it's sugarcane juice. So the next one we want to talk about is going into more. The next sort of four rums are 4 that will have seen Asian oak, because oak in itself is not just it's got a blend there. Definitely not a blender. So rum itself, or oak itself, is fascinating. And a lot of people think oak is just about the flavour that the oak gives. And yes, to an extent that is true. Oak definitely gives flavour. It definitely gives character to the spirit. But it's not just about the oak. It's also about that interaction of oxygen and the actual product itself, the spirit, because those alcohols start to oxidize and you get different sort of flavor profiles and things coming from that oxidation, and also that evaporation and change of the rum as it ages. Oak is an amazing subject, and yes, the different styles of oak you use, whether it's had sherry in it before, or port, or wine cask, or what have you, will all have an effect on the flavour of the final product. But there's very much, going kind of back to the very basics, is that they do give you different styles based on the initial distillate. So this one I'm going to talk about now, this is Santa Teresa, and this is their 1796. So Santa Teresa is essentially from Venezuela, and it is a rum that actually probably has seen something that resembles the Solera system. I am of the opinion that there's only a couple of places in the world that have a proper Solera. A lot of other people use what we call perpetual aging, which is a very different thing, but I'm not going to go into that now because that will take me a long time and I'll get very angry. As a sherry lover, I am very passionate about Solera systems and the truth behind them. So this is actually a rum that I think has really developed over the last couple of years, and I've started to go back to it a little bit more, and really it's just sort of, it was one of the ones when I tried it, I was like, oh, okay, I haven't tried this for a long time. I think the quality is going up in it, and it's becoming a very interesting product. So from Venezuela, as I said, and this for me sits in what we call the dry and spicy camp, and that's where you have some. So in this rum, you will have a little bit of pot, still, absolutely, but a lot of it is coming from multi-column still. And so what we kind of looked at when we looked at this multi-column still, we decided that multi-column still gives such an effect to the final product. Whether you have a little bit of pot in it or some traditional column or it's a blend of the three, that multi-column will always give a certain lightness of touch to the final product. So we didn't want to use the word industrial or anything because they're not. They're not. Some of these have a long history behind them. If you look at sort of Cuba and Havana, there's a long history there. So they're not modern rums. They're what we call modernist rums. So we use the word modernist because actually what we wanted to do was give a sense of something that's crafted, and isn't just being produced right now. It's had a history of being produced in this way for quite some time. So the word modernist seemed to encapsulate that for us quite nicely. And this one has been aged in oak. And straight away on the palate, you get that spice, that wood spice, a little bit of toasted coconut, a little bit of that kind of nutmeg, what I call that kind of Indian dried spice, that sort of sweet spice. And then behind it, there's that little bit of that brown sugar, that kind of creme caramel. On the palate, what you notice is there's a lot of flavour. I mean, this is not a rum that doesn't have flavour. There's bags of flavour. Licorice, toasted sort of, I would say toasted spices, when you're dry frying spices to get them sort of warmed up to release the aromas. It's got that in it. Got a little bit of kind of nuttiness there. A little bit of kind of then that orange zest and some of that sort of sweet marzipan fruit. But very much so on the finish, it's dry. It's got almost like, not a tannin. And when I talk about tannin, it's something that you find a lot in wine, and actually oak gives you tannin, and it's that slightly puckering feel here. It's not a bad thing. It's just one of the sort of characteristics of a product. And it's got that dryness. Even though there's sweetness there, there's richness, definitely. It's definitely got that sort of dry, spicy note. And that's what we find from a lot of rums that have this multi-column influence, this modernist rum, because actually it's where the wood is giving a little bit more character than the spirit. And that's just a style. So you've got that really nice, this is a sipping rum. You'd be quite happy to sip this over ice, or even mix it with a sort of simple serve if you wanted to. But very much in this sort of dry and spicy camp. So then we move on to the next in our sort of oak-led flavour camps. So I was talking to you about a gentleman called Richard Seal, who happens to be one of my favourite humans in the world. He makes me laugh. He gets phone calls from me at stupid o'clock in the morning when I've got something to ask him that's totally like random, and then I sit and talk drunkenly to him for a couple of hours. Poor man. He's very, very, very patient, but an amazing distiller, and for me, actually, one of the best distillers in the Caribbean at the moment. Comes from the Foursquare Distillery in the south of Barbados. And very much so, he is working with what we call traditional blended. Traditional blended is a blend of a traditional column still, so that's simple column still, and pot still. So he takes a blend of the two, and what that gives you is you get the weight and the richness from that pot, but also this elegance and this freshness from the column. So it's a really nice balance of both. What I should add about the Claran and the Doherty's, as well as the Hampton, is these do not have any added sugar. So sugar addition is common in the rum world, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it as a style, because it's what people like to drink and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I think what we need is a lot more transparency about its use, and we very much in our classification system indicated in each product whether there is sugar added, whether there's no sugar added, because it just creates a totally different style. And there is something there. For me, I prefer ones that don't have sugar added, but that's just my preference. And I think often it's something, like when you're going through your flavor journey, you start off liking sweet. Started off loving sweet stuff, and and as your palate kind of changes and develops and you get more into different things, your palate does change. But I think what we want from the rum world is a little bit more transparency and honesty around when sugar has been added or when it hasn't, because actually you as the consumer should have the ability to make the choice. That's my preaching done. Well, Richard doesn't add any sugar, and as I said, it's a blend of pot and column still, and he plays around with different aging, so it could be bourbon. This is the Doherty's XO, and this is finished in sherry Oloroso oak. Oloroso is a style of sherry that has a lot more nuttiness and oxidative characters than, say, a Fino, and is not as sweet as, say, a Pedro Jimenez, which is from dried raisins. So, I could give you a sherry lecture later, because I love sherry too. There's only a couple of things I don't really love, and that's vodka and Sauvignon Blanc. Sorry, people that like vodka and Sauvignon Blanc. It's just my preference. But I digress. So, on the nose on this one, immediately I get this lovely fruit. And, I always find this in Richard's rums. They always have this beautiful fruit first and foremost, and then you get the layers of that spice and the character from the oak coming through. This one definitely has a little hint of sort of that tropical note. It has that almost like a baked apple with raisins, that sort of sweet cinnamon nutmeg spice, a touch of kind of creme caramel, a tart tatin on the nose. Sorry, Richard, I never normally spit. I'm so sorry. Spit the rum. Before any of you go off on a tangent on that comment. So, this is definitely a rum that's got some attitude. It's got that pot still is giving it that weight. It's definitely giving it a little bit more roundness on the palate. There is a little bit of that dry wood spice, but then this lovely sort of licorice comes through and just lifts it. Medium bodied is how I sort of put this rum in if I was talking about its body. And again, that's that balance between that pot and column. And, it definitely has a lot of kind of character. And, this is one that's going to evolve in the glass and just change, but also one you could equally mix as well. So it's a really lovely, versatile rum. And one that I think is always a really nice one if you just want a little kind of cheeky after dinner drink when you've been stuck in isolation and you've been looking at yourself on a computer screen for the last however many minutes. But so this one is where we're putting in the flavor camp of sort of fruit and spice. So when we're talking about fruit and spice, for me, when I was tasting through these rums, where I found the rums that had this fruit and spice is very, very much when they either had influence of traditional column or pot still, and then were aged in oak. So for me, that kind of character very, very much came through. And I think these rums are ones definitely I find in the majority of rums from Barbados. I find them in a lot of rums that are sort of agricole but aged, is that fruit, because there's that lovely fruit component, and then you get the spice from the oak. So, where you have that traditional pot and column or a blend of the both, you get this character of fruit and spice. So the next one, and this is a rum that I call it Marmite. I absolutely love it, but I would say probably not the first one you should try on your tasting journey, because if you taste this as your first rum, you will not taste anything else afterwards, because it is such a beautiful beastie rum. And this is Hampton. It's 46% proof, and this is from Jamaica. And Hampton's one of these rums that, so at Christmas time I often work in the shops, and I love doing rum tasting when I'm in there. I'm just opening some bottles and getting people to try things. And either people going, oh my goodness, what's just happened to me, or falling totally in love and are like, I'm never going to drink another rum again in my life except Hampton. And I'm very much in the love camp of Hampton. It is kind of the Nebbiolo for me of the rum world. So Hampton Estate was actually a distillery that really didn't produce under its own label. It was producing a lot for other different marks and labels, and really was known for this very, very, very intense, aromatic, ester-filled rum. And I won't go too much into detail on how that happens, because that's probably something that would take up a lot longer than we have. But very much in the production method, and the use of muck pits and wild yeast and long slow fermentation just gives you these massive esters and intense flavors. So right now I haven't even lifted this up, and banana bread. For me, that's actually, and if we talk about terroir very much for me is, can I taste and smell where something comes from? And I stick my nose nowhere near Hampton, and I'm like, this is Hampton. And that's all about that banana. And actually in Jamaican rums a lot, I get that, even when it's a slightly lighter style, I definitely get that banana character. And, it's green banana, but then behind it, and banana bread, this is like, I want to eat, I'm hungry. It's got that lovely ripe papaya, a little guava, it's got peach kernel, some amaretti kind of notes. It's got spice, but it's a savoury spice, sort of layered in with this beautiful fruit. And, when we were looking at this as a camp, I was like, pretty much Jamaica needs its own subsection, and pretty much anything in this is Jamaican rum, because it is just such a distinguishable kind of style of rum. And this we put in the camp of tropical and fruity, because it is tropical notes. You get pineapple, you get banana, you get papaya, you get mango, guava. But then there's other fruits layered in there as well, and it's a cacophony of it's like a fruit salad, as one of my friends would say. But really intense. And again, that pot still is just giving you this lovely texture. It's weighty, it's silky. There is dryness on the fish, but then this sort of freshness, this acidity comes back through and just really livens up your palate. I mean, this is a rum and a half, and definitely a rum that kind of needs time and needs you to kind of let it come out of the glass and express itself. Again, makes a really awesome cocktail. If you go to Rumfest in London, which you have to do, you must visit the Velier stand and meet the wonderful Angelo, who makes the best cocktails from Hampton. And definitely one to kind of to taste, because it is just something very special. So the final one, and actually, probably where I started my journey in rum, and probably where a lot of you started your journey in rum. So this is Diplomatica, Diplomatica Reserva Exclusiva. This has a very, very special place in my heart, because this was actually the first distillery I ever visited. It's in Venezuela, and yes, most of you would say your first distillery was in Venezuela. Yes, it was. It was a long time ago. I was much younger. less wise. And I really fell in love with the people there. I think what they do is fantastic. I think that what I love about them is they're doing a lot of different styles of rum. Their white rum Planas, I think, is one of the best white rums, along with Veritas and people like this. It's and I like it because it's something that, if you're starting to get into rum, because especially with the Reserva Exclusiva, it does have some sugar there. They're not saying it doesn't. They're saying yes, it does. But what it does is it takes you on a really good journey. It lets you move, say, from a spiced rum into what we call proper rums. And I love that. This is the one that when I used to be the head buyer for Selfridges, and I remember that we used to get the guys who and the agents in the UK of this rum used to come in, and I would be like, if you don't sell 60 bottles in the next 3 hours, pathetic. And this used to sell out time and time again. It was always one of my best sellers, and still is. And it has a very special place in my heart. And this one for me is where we had this kind of camp that I kind of was like, there's all these rums that just they do have the sugar added to them, but they've got this real richness to them. And there's a kind of a camp that we decided we were going to label rich and treacly. And it is as it sounds, they're rich and they've got this really lovely treacly brown sugar sweetness to them. And they're very much, if you like the style of a spiced rum, these are really, really good. This is a really good flavour camp to start your journey into kind of the rums that are kind of along this kind of side of the table. And so on the nose, it's treacle, it's licorice, it's black chocolate, or dark chocolate, it's got sweet vanilla spice, it's a little Christmas cake, dried fruits. This is a rum that you just kind of put your nose in and you're like, Christmas, I'm there. Or this is a vanilla bomb, and I love that. And on the palate, it does just that. It's got richness, it's got spice, it's got vanilla, and it's got sweetness. And I think, and this is as I say, this is a rum to just simply enjoy and have a bit of fun with, And I think, one thing that I kind of want to get over to you, these flavor camps are very much for you to use to discover what style you like and what you want to drink. I know what I want to drink, but that's me. You don't have to listen to what I want to drink because my palate is very different to your palate. And, but what I also would say to you is use these flavor camps to actually try other ones that are similar. So, if you like rich and treacly, try one that's fruity and spicy, because actually you'll probably like it. If you like light and uncomplicated, try a herbaceous and grassy one. If you like mezcal, try herbaceous and grassy rums. This is a tool to help you kind of get into the rum world and really just have fun with it. And I'm going to leave you now because you're probably bored stiff of listening to me. But what I want to kind of get across to you is that rum has so much to offer, and there's so many different styles. And everything here is from either Latin America or the Caribbean. But there's now rum being produced all over the world. There's ones from Thailand, there's ones from Australia, there's ones that are aged in Europe that are very, very different to ones that have been aged in the tropics. This is a whole world that's out there, and actually, experiment, have fun, and try as many as you can. Thank you.